I've had kind of, I guess, I guess I would describe it as like a contentious relationship with the vocal community, like especially
Hmm.
in certain forums, Reddit being the primary one.
I love Reddit.
um right, where I don't like to like let people walk over me,
Hmm.
but I found, like, giving those rebuttals, and especially in usually like a kind of a sassy way, or like a condescending or demeaning way in some cases, uh like that sort of stuff would go to haunt you for a long period of time. And also, as somebody in a position of authority, like, that is something that I had to figure out, like, yeah, maybe that's not the best thing for me to be doing.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like, I was trying to mesh these two worlds of people being like being the player, right? Who, I still believe that I'm like the game's harshest critic to this day. Community maybe doesn't see it all the time, but um, and then the developer side, right? So I wanted to be the player, but also be the developer as well, and kind of like convince people, like, hey, I'm still, you guys, and I still have these same concerns, but honestly, it just
What's
didn't
up,
make
fellow
sense to do that.
kids?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's uh, exactly. But it really didn't make sense. So I started to try to like distance myself, and also, like, just take the beatings that the community was willing to dish out or whatever. And I just kind of shrug it off nowadays. Because hey, surprise, on the internet, people are kind of crappy. Uh, but it's also just not worth fighting those fights anymore. So I think that if we keep like moving forward, um, like that'll hopefully end up eventually being like kind of all the evidence that people need.
Sure, sure. And one of the things that I've heard you say is that the way people interact with you is based much more on how well the game is doing than on what you have to
Hmm.
say.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. You can So when people are in good spirits, you could honestly, you could say anything, and people would be like, "Yeah, yeah, we love it." And then if the game is doing poorly, and you're like, you're putting in like your heart and soul into this update that's meant to, like, alleviate issues, or like, bring some good back to the game, or just like alleviate concerns of the community. It's like um they'll start complaining about something else, or they'll best case scenario is that they say, why did it take this long to do this? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I get it, that sucked, but like, can we just start, like, move ahead?
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a mentality that's just like, it's kind of beyond people, when they're like acting emotionally, or just trolly, or under
Hmm.
the veil of anonymity that comes with being an internet individual.
Yeah. I think also too, there's like a limited access thing. Like,
Mm.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, being out in front of the community, people feel like you. It's been interesting. The more I kind of have poked back to see, like, who you've talked to, what videos that you've been on from other creators and things like that, the more I realize that you are kind of you hang around Planetside. You're on Twitch. You're keeping tabs on things. You're reading the Reddit threads.
Hmm.
Um, it's clear that you've changed when you decide to weigh in and how you do when you do decide to. But you're still very active there, and you're one of the outside of like seeing Alan, and now we're getting these fantastic any time of the week updates from Andy Sites whenever anything is happening.
Hmm.
I'm convinced that guy must not sleep a lot too.
uh I don't know. The guy works so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear to me. Um, but how important is it that the community has access to the people who are working on the game? To your mind?
That's a good question that I really don't have the answer for. So so, a long time ago, what was his name? Tony, community manager, can't Radar X. God,
Chat.
I can't remember
Help us
why.
out, chat.
Can't remember his last name for some
Someone
reason.
will tell us.
Um,
Continue.
Yeah, yeah. But he and I did an experiment on Reddit where we
Oh.
just did not communicate for 30 days. 30 days, solid. No post, no nothing. Uh, and we checked the engagement, with the people who are running Reddit, and there was no difference between like if we engaged or if we didn't engage. Like people just like to talk. Uh, Granted, at the time, I think something that might skew the numbers is that there was network issues too. There were like a big deal, so there was probably more to talk about then. But like realistically, it's hard to actually determine how much it helps versus how much it hurts. And especially, I think if you look at other games, the the intention uh, the intent to communicate is kind of all over the board.
Hmm.
Like you look at Warframe, who's like very invested in their community, and they're doing all these forums and all these uh, like they're chiming in to post and everything else.
Weekly streams, giveaways all
Oh
the
yeah,
time,
yeah, and they do a
and
great job. And like I
very
can't express.
centralized too.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so much work and love and effort goes into the game and the community from them. Um, and I wish I knew how much they got out of it because I think that'd be illuminating for me. But then you look at other games like actually I might be speaking out of turn, but I don't think that like Bungie tends to communicate uh, at least not nearly as much as Warframe does. And even their patch notes are really kind of like vague. Like they're not telling you the individual values that are
They
changing.
have
They're
to
just
really
saying like,
held
oh, this
back.
does less damage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Warframe, they make it kind of feel like you're walking into their kitchen while
Mm,
they're working on the game at the same time. Like they put to your point, a tremendous amount of effort, and they have senior stakeholders on the game from different departments on every single week to share things. Um, I dare say I think that they've been burned a few times, but because they've set an expectation with their community of such high access and such
yeah,
high
yeah.
agency that there's a story that you tell when you say come into my kitchen, which implies help me make the dish. And if you don't actually accept the help or the
Mm.
feedback, uh, it's a tough thing. And the idea of a live services video game like a Planetside or a Warframe or something like that, I think is still something. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone's still figuring out how the
It's
heck to do it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Actually, you bring up a good point with kind of the uh, when you don't take people's feedback into consideration, or I'm butchering your verbiage, but a lot of times feedback sucks. So like it's or it doesn't make sense at the time, or like we have no plans to change that, or we are putting things into the game in a certain way now because we know what's coming in the future that we haven't
Right.
like revealed to you yet. There's always like a lot of stuff that's happening in the background, and like us as game developers, like we have to think, kind of years in advance,
Mm.
or else we're. I mean, you get into the point where you're just like living from update to update, and like that's not good. And I know because I've had to do that. Um, but yeah, so like as far as how much value does the community's opinion have, and also like how do you determine it? Like how do you determine what people actually want versus like what's actually healthy for the game? A
Hmm.
lot of times you'll have people who, I mean, they certainly know what they don't like. They may not know why they don't like it, and they most likely don't know the solutions. And even solutions that seem like a good idea uh, could be like seem like a good idea because it's who it's coming from, or because they're not like kind of thinking about like everything else that would actually happen, surrounding it. And you see stuff like that all the time,
Hmm.
and it's like we are all still figuring it out. Like even when it comes like not to just the long term stuff, but the short term stuff as well. How much community interaction you want to have, and like how do you funnel um, like how do you leverage your community uh, into giving you good feedback, like good focused feedback on certain things that you want feedback on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Two things that you just talked about really leapt out at me. One is the fact that when you're taking feedback from the game, you're having to reconcile it against a vision of the game for you that is patches ahead.
Hmm.
which the community doesn't get to see in the same way. That's the first. The second thing is it's something that I've heard elsewhere too, talking about the way communities and developers interact. Is that um, developers don't always know what's wrong with their game, but gamers don't know. While they do know what's wrong, they are not in the best place to know how to address it.
Right.
So you're in the tough spot um, as lead game designer of having to trust what people say is not working, but not be able to necessarily take what they suggest. Because most of the really passionate Planetside players out there have put in thousands of hours. You can't replace that kind of experience. Like, there aren't that many people, I'm sure, on the dev team who have anywhere close to that kind of experience.
No, just me.
Right. Right. And
um,
that's something else we can
yeah,
talk
but
about too.
fortunately, I play the game, so like I have a decent understanding of all these issues. Even the ones that like that aren't in my specific sphere of expertise. Like I only use vehicles to an extent. In construction, I hardly ever touch it all.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just not my play style. But at the same time, because of my knowledge about the game, like I can see where people are coming from, and that's important to have too. Unfortunately, so the double-edged sword here is that when people have extensive time in the game, it also creates a bias. In most cases,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, because they're so like honed in on their specific play style, that they naturally want to protect that play style, or they view things differently. Like, oh, this is cheap because it's killing me in this way or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you could. I think one of the cool things about our game is that because there are so many different spheres of influence, when you get them all like talking back and forth to one another, it's very clear that there is no solid answer, which to me seems like hey, the game is relatively balanced. Yeah,
Yeah.
when people aren't like when yeah, when the whole spectrum of people aren't complaining about the same thing, then this is probably it's a pretty good place to be, I think.
Yeah. It makes sense.